Imagine settling into a plush velvet seat at a classic old-school movie theater. The lights dim, the screen flickers, and a timeless Hollywood icon appears before you. His face perfectly angled, his gaze steady, and an air of confidence exuding from his every move. That icon is Robert Taylor, an actor often described as possessing the perfect profile, a man whose life story reads like a Hollywood script, brimming with twists, triumphs, romance, scandal, and reinvention. Now close your eyes and let yourself drift back into the glamorous golden age of Tinseltown, where big studios ruled supreme, stars were larger than life, and the notion of cinematic celebrity was still blossoming into the phenomenon we recognize today. Robert Taylor was brought into the world on August 5, 1911, as Spangler Arlington Bruh in rural Nebraska, a quiet setting where cattle outnumbered neighbors, and the idea of Hollywood might as well have been a fairy tale. His father was a farmer who would uproot the family almost on a whim, chasing opportunity or better farmland wherever it could be found. That constant sense of motion laid early groundwork for Robert's willingness to adapt, though it also signaled that life would rarely stand still for him. When his mother fell gravely ill, his father abandoned farming to become a doctor, devoting himself to bringing his wife back to health. This selfless transformation worked. Miraculously, Taylor's mother recovered, but it came at a cost. Her near-death experience ignited in her a fierce overprotectiveness. She hovered over him incessantly, as though every moment might rob her of her beloved son. Young Spangler had little breathing room in his mother's watchful gaze. Even when he escaped to California for college, he found her presence trailing him, if not physically, then in spirit. Classmates, sensing his anxiety and mother's boy status, teased him. They may have believed that this shy cello major would never break free from his mother's nest, but fate had other plans. At a fateful college performance, he caught the eye of an MGM talent scout who declared that Spangler had the perfect profile. In an era when matinee idol looks and a chiseled jawline could open every door in Hollywood, that perfect profile was gold. For a modest salary of $35 a week, which was not too shabby in 1930s money, MGM signed the star-struck young man. But the studio that had made icons of Greta Garbo and Clark Gable had a strict system for building new stars. They wasted no time in reshaping him, molding him into someone they could flaunt on poster after poster across America. First order of business, that mouthful of a name had to go. So, Spangler Arlington Bruh was rebranded as Robert Taylor. Next, MGM insisted he bulk up, cut his hair a certain way, deepen his voice, walk more confidently, sit more squarely, speak precisely. The man had to be tested, tried, and polished from head to toe. They wanted to erase every lingering hint of that soft, unassuming boy from Nebraska. In the early days, Taylor became known as the test boy. His actual paying gigs in front of cameras were limited to screen tests for other aspiring performers, yet he charmed studio executives with his sincerity, his unwavering politeness, and, of course, that rakish handsomeness. A turning point soon arrived when an MGM actor fell ill, and the studio needed a quick replacement for a short film called Buried Loot. Someone recalled that the test boy was ready for a real chance. Robert seized the opportunity, grateful simply to be in front of a camera that wasn't just a test rig. The short film's success caught MGM by surprise. Why on earth, they wondered, had they wasted this promising talent on endless screen tests? His momentum grew when the esteemed leading lady Irene Dunne, older, sophisticated, and highly regarded, needed a male counterpart for magnificent obsession. She handpicked Taylor, a bold move given that he was 7 years her junior and relatively unproven in a major Hollywood release. Yet the chemistry worked. The film premiered in 1935, attracting enormous crowds despite an icy December evening. Audiences were swept away by the romantic storyline, Dunn's gravitas, and Taylor's magnetic screen presence. Suddenly, overnight it seemed, Robert Taylor was a freshly crowned Hollywood heartthrob. MGM, famously cunning in its publicity machine, began planting rumors of throngs of starstruck women gathering at train stations just to glimpse him. Then, when actual crowds turned up at his next stop, the press had a field day. Everyone believed they were witnessing the unstoppable new idol in motion. The studio's illusions were becoming reality. But beneath the swirling excitement, the real Robert Taylor remained a bit of a timid, naive soul, still tethered to motherly supervision, still craving a mentor's guidance. And there was one man who was more than happy to take the role of father figure, albeit for purely business reasons: Louis B. Mayer, MGM's fearsome head. Mayer liked to hold his stars on a short leash. If Robert's mother had made him anxious, Mayer's authority left no room for debate. He determined which roles Taylor would accept, how he would present himself at publicity events, and even which romantic prospects were acceptable. In an era when celebrities were property of the studios, Robert Taylor's early success turned him into a commodity. But the top brass at MGM believed there was one critical element missing from Taylor's life: a carefully orchestrated romance, preferably the kind that would double as a PR jackpot. Up stepped an unexpected matchmaker, Zeppo Marx, younger brother to the zany Marx brothers, who called Taylor with news of a possible introduction. A leading lady named Barbara Stanwyck was interested in meeting a certain R.T. Stanwyck, already a star in her own right, had carved out a reputation as a fiercely independent actress, unafraid of gritty roles, and considered something of a Hollywood rarity. With her tough persona, Stanwyck contrasted sharply with the mild, agreeable Taylor. Their first meeting, orchestrated by Zeppo in a nightclub, played like the opening of a romantic comedy. Barbara, expecting to be introduced to someone called R.T., didn't connect the initials to the tall, handsome man dancing with her. It was a comedic misunderstanding that soon gave way to real sparks. Before long, the two became nearly inseparable. Taylor was enthralled by Stanwyck's forthrightness and the way she commanded rooms. He'd grown up overshadowed by strong parental figures, so here again, he found himself drawn to someone decisive. Their bond blossomed quickly. Taylor even arranged to live adjacent to Stanwyck's sprawling ranch in the San Fernando Valley, buying a property next door to hers so he could keep up with her shared love of horses and country living. They discovered they had things in common, or at least Taylor adopted her interests wholesale, as though he was once again happy to follow rather than lead. But no matter how cozy they got, one towering figure loomed above them: Louis B. Mayer himself. Mayer did not approve of Stanwyck. He apparently saw in her the potential to overshadow Taylor's soft-spoken nature. She was older, she was known for a strong personality, and she wasn't exactly what Mayer wanted for the Robert Taylor brand. Still, the pair struck up enough on-screen chemistry in films like His Brother's Wife that Mayer cautiously relented. The official studio line was that a marriage might happen in the not-too-distant future, provided it served the company well. All of that changed when a magazine made a scandalous accusation. Robert Taylor and Barbara Stanwyck, though not married, were living together. The publication hammered them for being immoral, especially in the moral climate of the 1930s Hollywood, where stars had to keep up pristine appearances. Suddenly, Louis B. Mayer was incensed. He was a businessman, but he also guarded the moral facade of MGM's star stable. Under intense pressure, Taylor and Stanwyck had to save face by tying the knot, or face what could be professional ruin for them both. On May 14, 1939, the pair married in a ceremony that looked romantic from the outside but was widely reported to be orchestrated by the studio. If you scan the photos, you might sense the tension. Legend has it that on their wedding night, Robert ended up sleeping in his mother's home, presumably because no one had remembered to clue her in about the wedding. The rumor mill exploded. Why would a newlywed choose to spend the night with his mother instead of his bride? People drew their own conclusions, including one that Barbara Stanwyck might prefer the company of women and that the entire marriage was a front. MGM, anxious to dispel damaging gossip, took immediate action. Gone were the pretty boy roles. Robert Taylor was recast in more traditionally masculine parts, Billy the Kid, a rough-and-tumble boxer in The Crowd Roars, and other roles designed to buff up his image as a tough guy. No more romantic waif overshadowed by older female leads. He had to look unequivocally all-man as the studio's PR machine hammered home. Uncomfortable though he may have been in these new roles, he'd never enlisted in a single bar brawl in real life. He managed to pull off the transformation. By 1941, the United States was entering World War II. The government's propaganda efforts quickly latched onto Hollywood's star wattage to shape public opinion. One of the objectives was to depict the Soviet Union, a new ally to the U.S., in a friendlier light, effectively reversing years of negative sentiment. So was born Song of Russia, a film that attempted to paint Russia in a positive, sympathetic glow. Taylor was cast in uniform, playing a manly figure in a production that soared with epic patriotism. The irony, however, was that behind the scenes, Robert Taylor ached to be more than just a cinematic hero. He actually wanted to enlist and serve his country, but once again, Louis B. Mayer put his foot down. Taylor would be far more valuable making movies than risking injury or worse in combat. Taylor complied, so used to being guided by stronger personalities that he never fought back. Later, with the war intensifying, he finally did get into the U.S. Air Force, but he landed an instructor's job stateside instead of a combat post. Rumors circulated that it was Stanwyck who engineered this arrangement to keep him safe and close, or perhaps Mayer had pulled some strings. After the war, the hysteria of anti-communism spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Investigations raged. Who in this glitzy world was secretly a Red? Taylor, naive or otherwise, had become involved in a group meant to protect American ideals in the film industry. Then along came the more ominous House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, demanding that anyone with knowledge of communist infiltration step forward and name names. In a chilling echo of how easily he'd complied with Mayer's directives, Robert Taylor took the stand. Some actors refused to snitch. Others found ways to circumvent the more damning allegations. Taylor, though, was so anxious to please that, when asked for potential communists in the industry, he dropped two names, Karen Morley and Howard Da Silva. Both would be blacklisted as a direct result. For Taylor, this was one fateful decision he'd made without anyone else's explicit direction, and it would haunt him. While it wasn't a crime to testify, Hollywood would soon condemn him in effect for betraying colleagues. Morley went well over 2 decades without meaningful Hollywood work. Da Silva lost over a decade of his career. The shine of Robert Taylor's good boy reputation cracked, seemingly beyond repair. Czechoslovakia and Hungary banned his films, as did certain left-leaning factions in France. It's true these specific bans may not have impacted him financially. Studios pivoted easily to other markets, but the intangible cost to his esteem and legacy was enormous. As if that weren't enough behind the scenes, his marriage to Barbara Stanwyck, already rumored to have been forced in the first place, was coming apart. This time, however, It was Taylor stepping out of line. He fell for Lana Turner on the set of Johnny Eager. Their reported chemistry sparked the nickname Tint, and tabloids devoured every rumor of torrid on-set kisses and maybe more. The gossip reached Stanwyck, who allegedly responded with desperation, possibly self-harm. Taylor later claimed her wrist wounds were accidental, but observers never bought it. The seeds of discontent had been sown. By the time he made Quo Vadis in Italy, rumors erupted that he'd pursued a relationship with actress Lea DeLeo. A furious Stanwyck demanded that Taylor choose, come home, and recommit to their marriage or let her go. He chose neither, effectively ending the relationship and freeing himself from the woman who, ironically, had been forced upon him by the studios in the first place. Newfound freedom, however, didn't translate into joy. Instead of enjoying an easy bachelor lifestyle, Taylor returned to living with his mother. In fact, he famously took up residence in the maid's quarters of the house he had bought for her, storing his clothes in the breakfast nook because there was no other space. Perhaps he felt safest tethered to the only unconditional love he had ever known. Over time, the emotional toll of his messy split from Stanwyck settled into regret. Or maybe it's more accurate to say Robert Taylor rarely showed regret. His greatest talent was enduring in stoic silence. Not for the last time, though. Fate had its own plan. He met German actress Ursula Thiess, described in certain circles as the most beautiful woman in the world. Howard Hughes had brought her to the States to become a star. A whirlwind courtship ended in a second marriage for Taylor, giving him not just a wife, but also two stepchildren, Manuela and Michael, who carried plenty of baggage from their lives in Germany. They had a troubled past, and assimilation into Hollywood life was far from smooth. Meanwhile, the rumors that had plagued Taylor never fully disappeared, but they quieted enough for him to continue working. He no longer had the same boyish aura, but he was recognized as a stable, leading man. Then real strife erupted at home. His stepson Michael had a serious brush with the law in Germany. He had attempted to poison his own father and had served time for it. Taylor thus found himself in a terrifying situation. A potentially dangerous young man living under his roof. It must have been impossible to relax, yet fatherly duty dictated that Taylor try to guide the boy, or at least keep him out of further trouble. Try as he might, the situation spiraled. Soon, Robert and Ursula had 2 additional children together, expanding their family to 6. This might have looked idyllic on the surface, a big blended brood, but conflict with the older stepchildren escalated and garnered unwelcome headlines. The stress chipped away at Taylor's emotional reserves. He found reprieve in an odd invitation, a return to the screen opposite his ex-wife. Barbara Stanwyck, struggling for roles, had taken on a low-budget horror film called The Nightwalker, and the producers wanted to re-team these 2 iconic but complicated figures for publicity. Robert politely asked Ursula if she was comfortable with the idea. Her answer was ambiguous enough that he went ahead. The project gave him a professional challenge and a slight thrill of nostalgia for times past. Yet the real bomb was ticking beneath his health. He had been a heavy smoker for years, up to 3 packs a day. During the filming of another project, doctors discovered he had what they called valley fever, requiring surgery. Once they cut in, though, they realized it was far more dire, lung cancer. He stopped smoking, but it was too late. It's chilling to think that while he was forging ahead with new roles, his own body was staging a quiet rebellion. As if that crisis weren't enough, tragedy blindsided the family. Michael, the troubled stepson, had been placed in a mental institution for erratic behavior. Soon after he was released, Ursula went to deliver medication at the motel where he was staying, only to discover his lifeless body. He had overdosed, an event that no parent should ever have to endure. Grief crashed into the household. Robert's health deteriorated further. In a tragically short span, Ursula found herself reeling from the loss of her son, just as Robert's condition took a fatal nosedive. The man once renowned for his broad shoulders and perfect profile was now withering away, hair thinning, face etched with pain, and a body that could no longer fight a disease that had spread well beyond its initial point of origin. Robert Taylor passed away not long afterward, leaving behind a heartbreakingly tangled legacy. He was only 57 years old. Ursula was forced to arrange funerals for her son and husband nearly back to back, an emotional devastation that can scarcely be described. By then, Robert Taylor's name had already been quietly scrubbed from certain places it had once been immortalized. MGM, the studio that had at one time plastered his face everywhere, had renamed a building once dedicated to him. They saw no reason to trumpet his memory, partly because his brand of patriotism and willingness to name names before HUAC had long since become a black mark in many corners of Hollywood. It clashed with the narrative that was now popular in the industry, where heroic figures were those who refused to testify rather than those who cooperated. Moreover, the Robert Taylor brand, the man with the perfect profile, no longer resonated in a post-studio era Hollywood that favored method actors, gritty realism, and a more rebellious spirit. With more than 50 films to his credit, never once nominated for an Oscar, Robert Taylor had quietly slipped into the almost, but not quite iconic bracket of Hollywood history. He had been overshadowed by bigger personalities at every stage. First his mother, then Louis B. Mayer, then Barbara Stanwyck, and eventually overshadowed by his own missteps under pressure. The man who had shown so much promise, who possessed a face that launched countless fan letters, fell victim to an era's moral dictates, manipulative studio control, a deeply compromised marriage, and a disastrous involvement with HUAC that permanently stained his name. In the end, the real tragedy of Robert Taylor might be that he never discovered who he truly wanted to be. Even years later, his story stands as a cautionary tale about how easy it is to lose oneself under Hollywood's glaring lights. And that's the startling, tragic journey of Robert Taylor, the golden boy who always seemed to do what he was told, until he didn't, and who soared so high that the slightest miscalculation sent him tumbling in ways few could have predicted. Though his face has faded from memory for many, the complexities of his life remain riveting, an echo of a glamorous yet ruthless time that devoured its most malleable stars. If you've enjoyed peering behind the curtain of Hollywood's golden age tonight, and if you've felt that tug of fascination for a man who had everything but could never fully claim it as his own, then stick around and subscribe. There are countless other stories waiting in the wings, filled with triumphs, scandals, and heartbreaks that shaped the history of entertainment. Keep watching, keep digging into the past, and together we'll uncover more hidden gems and sobering cautionary tales from that endlessly intriguing realm called Hollywood.